is Tucker Johnson, and I am your instructor today as we all experience Nimdzi Live Learning. Nimdzi Live Learning is an offshoot of our regular podcast live stream, Nimdzi Live, where we interview the most interesting people in the language services industry and beyond, I would like to say. But today we're running this as a workshop. That's why I'm introducing myself as your instructor rather than your host. But that doesn't mean you still can't check out Nimdzi Live. We host events regularly here on LinkedIn Events. We also live stream over on our YouTube channel, Facebook, Twitter, whichever is your social media platform of choice. Go and look us up and you'll be able to find us there. And while you're over there, make sure to subscribe to Nimdzi Insights. That's how you know that you're going to be getting the latest notifications when we publish new content or when we do live streams if you'd like to participate. So go over, follow, subscribe, do all of that good stuff. Nimdzi Learning workshops and events cover localization processes, strategies, industry intelligence, best practices, and language technology. The Nimdzi Learning experience will give you and your global team the tools you need to take your organization to the next level. Our offerings cover localization project management training, localization QA training, sales process training, translation resources, and much more. Explore our ever-expanding selection of training and development options and see which one is right for you and your team. That's right. Today, this is a freebie. This is just a fun little live stream that we're doing. We're doing this Workshop Wednesday series where we're going to be trying to do workshops every Wednesday, or at least as many Wednesdays as possible. But the real meat and potatoes is to be found over at nimdzi.com/training. So go check that out if you'd like a customized syllabus built for your team on that. And because this is a free training, of course, I'm going to be plugging a lot of stuff and selling you a bunch of stuff that you don't need. But the first thing is actually something that you do need. It's something that everybody in the localization industry really should have their eye on, which is Multilingual Magazine, because Multilingual Magazine is publishing the latest issue today, this week, sometime soon. I'm not sure, but you need to be checking your mailboxes if you're a subscriber to Multilingual Magazine. If you're a subscriber to the digital services, check your email inbox. And if you're not a subscriber, then go over to multilingual.com and check out the discount packages that they have over there, because there's some really cool packages with some really cool bonus material and gifts available for people that subscribe to Multilingual right now. Once again, that's multilingual.com. Next, if you like this event, if you're an event person, especially with in-person events coming back on the scene here in the language services industry, I encourage you, go over to nimdzi.com/events and check out the event database that we have over here. It's a really cool tool that lists the upcoming events in the language services industry. You can filter by event type, you can filter by date range, by location, remote/in-person. It's a very powerful tool. And if you're looking for the next event that you'd like to attend, then this is your place. This is your place. So make sure to check that out. Once again, that's nimdzi.com/events. Lastly, before we get started here, I want to introduce the chat. The chat, you guys are the most important part of these live streams. Of course, this is why we do it live rather than just pre-recorded. This is why we do it as a LinkedIn event rather than just a boring old Zoom webinar, because you guys get to participate, ask questions in the chat. I do not have an operator today, unfortunately, but I will from time to time be pulling up the chat and making sure that I respond to any questions, comments, arguments, hate mail that you may send in the chat over there. And what else we got here? Introduction to the platform. Let's introduce you to the platform. I talked about LinkedIn events. We like LinkedIn events because it makes it easy to share and invite new people. You'll notice if you are attending a LinkedIn event, there's that invite button. And it's a very powerful tool because you can use that invite button to invite anybody in your LinkedIn network. If there's something that one of your team members or one of your clients or one of your prospects might find interesting, don't be afraid to use that LinkedIn invite button. Add some value to your prospects, add some value for your team members. Likewise, there's these reaction buttons, which are really cool. And did they get rid of the reaction buttons? I haven't been doing this for a while. No, they got the reaction buttons down the bottom of the stream. And I'm waiting for them to bring in the laughter. You notice they pulled in a funny or a laughter or a ha-ha emoticon in LinkedIn nowadays, which makes me very happy, but they haven't migrated that over to LinkedIn yet. But feel free to use those to your heart's content. You can spam that like button as many times as you want. Getting right into it. Today, we are talking about developing and maintaining localization quality best practices. This is part 2 of a 2-part Workshop Wednesday series that I've been working on, that we've been presenting. The first part was last week. If you missed that, the stream is still available. Just go to Nimdzi's LinkedIn page, scroll down until you see it, and you should be able to check that out. The video should still be up there, and you can check that out. We went a little over 2 hours. Last week, I struggled to get everything in on time with the workshop. We went a little over 2 hours, but this week, I think we're going to have plenty of time. We don't have that much content to cover today. We're just going to be wrapping up things and tying a nice little bow on it, and perhaps responding to some questions from chat. I see there's about a little over 20 people joining in chat right now, so welcome one and all. Go ahead and introduce yourself and make some friends while we're at it. Introducing today's topic. Today we're going to be talking about language quality, specifically, as mentioned, setting up a language quality program. Participants today can expect this workshop to review language quality concepts within the context of a localization workflow, understand the basics of building a quality program, learn how to customize the quality process in a sustainable and scalable way. Who is this workshop for? This workshop's for, well, essentially anybody that wants to learn more about localization quality best practices, but specifically client-side managers, client-side localization directors, globalization directors, vendor-side program managers, vendor-side quality managers, although a lot of this might be some repeat information for any quality managers out there, and that's okay. That's okay. And in case you don't know me, my name is Tucker Johnson. I'm one of the founders of Nimdzi Insights. These days I do a lot of these workshops, do a lot of custom training, custom office hours, and Q&A sessions with Nimdzi clients, Nimdzi partners that engage with us to help essentially outsource their team's learning and development. So if you're a globalization manager out there, doesn't matter vendor side, client side, and you're wondering, how am I going to make sure that I'm fulfilling my responsibility as a manager to my team, which is providing ongoing professional development? Don't worry, we got you covered. We got you covered. As I already went through this, what's in this workshop today, so I think we can go ahead and start getting right into it today. As I mentioned, this is part 2. Go check out part 1. We're going over quality tools. 4 sections in here, and I have some bonus content I might get to, might not, depending upon how much coffee I drink. But we're going to be going through quality tools. We're going to be taking a look at machine translation, looking at quality customization and cultivation, and lastly, just kind of tying a bow on everything, summarizing it with language quality management do's and don'ts, and wrapping up the course. That's what's on the docket for today. So, lesson 3, once again, this is part 2. So that's not a mistake. This is lesson 3, quality tools and automation. In this first section, we're going to be talking about, well, quality automation tools. We're going to be talking about what's the best approach. Do we want a fully automated QA process? Do we want a fully human driven QA process, or are we going to go with a hybrid approach? Hint, it's probably going to be a hybrid approach, is what I will be recommending. Then we're going to take a look at some additional resources out there that I'm not going to go into in depth today, but I'm going to point you in the right direction to see where you can go if you're interested in finding out more information about quality assurance plugins, features, TMS features, standalone quality management tools, or looking to build some new integrations with your existing or future translation management system. So to start, let's do a quick overview of quality automation tools. And I'm sure there's people in the chat. I should have prefaced this in my introduction, is that I do not identify as a quality manager. I have great respect for quality managers. It's a job that you probably wouldn't want to hire me for, just being honest. I'm more on the operations side, so I've worked closely with quality managers, and there's always been this healthy give and take, separation of church and state between quality managers and production managers. And I'll talk more about that if we get a chance to go into the bonus content. So any quality managers out there in chat, make sure, keep me honest. Keep me honest. If I'm missing out on anything, then make sure to let us know. Caveat aside, getting right into it. So different types of quality automation tools. So automation and quality are two concepts that are not opposed, but they're not the first things that you're going to think of together in the same place. There's a lot, when you think of tasks and processes that can be automated, you're generally thinking of really cut and dry, black and white, standardized processes, standardized tasks, standardized checks, things like that. You're not thinking of highly subjective, highly stylized type things. And so much of what quality managers have to worry about is the style. It's the tone. It's these very human, subjective concepts. But there are some things out there that lend themselves very well to automation. And with the advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning and other such technologies out there, what's falling within the scope of automatable tasks for quality management is getting more and more. The list is getting longer. But some of the tasks that do lend themselves already very well to automation for quality is anything that's rules based, essentially. So, and this isn't to say that it's fully standardized. You can customize these things, but think numbers. Numbers, there's going to be numbers, there's going to be measurements, there's going to be decimal points down to a certain number of decimals in things. These can very easily be checked. Think of spell check. Spell check has been around for a very long time. Spell check isn't something very new. We've all been spell checking our book reports for the last however many years. Spell check has been around, but it's not something new. It's a rules-based thing. Grammar checks, punctuation checks, things like that is what falls into the rules-based category. Terminology is another aspect of quality that lends itself pretty well with a little bit of work, with a little bit of preparation. Terminology checks can be run in a very automated way. And the way that you do this, of course, is putting together glossaries, term bases, whatever you're calling them, and you're running these through the terminology tools, the terminology check tools, to make sure that what is in the glossary, which is a bilingual glossary, so you'll have the source and then the preferred target glossary term, and making sure that what's in the glossary is the term that's in the glossary is the term that's going to be used in the final product. So terminology lends itself very well to automation as well. Related to terminology is the concept of consistency. So this is rules-based terminology, kind of a hybrid. We're overlapping here a little bit. But just as a glossary check is going to be checking for consistency with the glossary terms, There are tools out there that allow you to check for consistency across strings, even for terms that may or may not be in the glossary. So think URLs, for example. URLs are they getting messed up? Are they getting localized properly? If they do need to be localized, there are ways there are automated ways to make sure that those URLs aren't getting broken, that they're still pointing to a valid URL, things like that. And lastly, we already covered spelling. And spell checks have been around for a very long time, but most of these tools that are worth their salt out there are going to be able to be customized. So everyone's got their own specific product names, do not translate lists, person names, titles. I think anything else that may not adhere to standardized spelling. For example, Nimdzi Insights is going to get flagged as incorrect spelling in a standard spell check. But with the tools available today, no problem to add that to the dictionary, and make sure it's not getting flagged in the future. So lots of stuff can be automated. And it should be. It should be. And generally speaking, if something can be automated and it's a minimal investment to do so, both as an upfront investment and for an ongoing, per handoff or per project investment, then I would recommend going ahead and doing that. What have you got to lose? But that doesn't remove the need for human involvement in the quality process. And this is a lot of what we talked about last week in those 2 hours when we were talking about a lot of human-driven tasks, talking about right sourcing and onboarding and training your linguistic team, making sure that you have the right resources, the right qualifications, the right credentials. And these are all activities that, if not need to, at least should be performed by a human. So we can kind of look at quality management in two different ways. We can look at it in terms of human quality assurance and automated quality assurance. And here on screen here we have a simple table that kind of outlines the description, benefits, challenges, and comments for each one. So just going across the list here, human translation, it's basically standard QA, usually review formed base. We talked a lot about dynamic quality framework from Taos and the different error types and severity types last week when we covered part 1. Human QA can be done pretty much in any environment, whether that's directly in the translation management system or offline. It doesn't matter so much, as opposed to automated QA checks, which really need to be in a specific environment where the tool can run those automated checks. And as we already mentioned, these are things like terminology, consistency, product names, customized spell checks, spelling, punctuation, untranslated segments are always a good thing to check for. So the machine will crawl and say anything in the target text that actually looks exactly like the source text. It's going to flag that. The thing with automated checks is you're going to get a lot of false positives. And what does that mean when I'm talking about false positives? Is these automated checks, typically they're not going to be making changes to the translation themselves, right? Think when you run a spell check in a Word doc, it's not going through and automatically updating the text and fixing the spelling. It's asking, would you like to fix this? And you say yes, no, ignore, whatever it may be. So what these checks are doing is they're generating these reports, typically in some sort of CSV file or Excel file, and those reports will need to be reviewed by a human. And not everything that's going to be included in that report is going to be an actual quality issue that you need to be fixing. So that's what we call false positives. Some of the benefits of each for human translation: it's very trackable, it's easily quantifiable against industry standards. So when there's a human in the loop, there's, most of these human reviewers, they know what's going on. They've been doing this for a while, and there's general standards, reference Taos conversation from last week for more information on that. It's easier to provide feedback and specific examples, particularly when it comes to qualitative feedback. So remember when we looked at the sample QA forms last week, there were these sections where the reviewer could just provide general feedback, general notes. And general notes is not something that an automated check is going to be good at. Good automated checks are going to be good for, all the things I already mentioned: numbers, punctuation, branding, product names. Most TMSs these days will have some form of QA checks either embedded into them or available via plugins. And if they don't have things available via plugins, QA checks available via plugins, then there's probably going to be, not probably, there will be third-party or standalone tools out there that can be used to cover those checks, even if they're not included in the TMS. That's not to say, though, that neither of these comes without their downsides, their challenges. So for humans, humans are humans. Humans are humans. And when you're managing human-driven QA processes, then it comes with all of the complexity that comes with managing humans. There's going to be scheduling issues. There's going to be personalities involved. There's going to be the need for training and development. All of these things, all of the complexities that come with humans come with human quality assurance. And it also means that you need to have that supply chain ready to go, right? Just like you have a supply chain full of translators out there, you need to have a supply chain of reviewers. And once again, I should probably stop saying this, but like mentioned last week, the skill set between translators and reviewers, related, not exactly the same. You're going to want to look for different credentials most of the time for the people that are doing the language quality assurance than for the folks that are working on the translation in the original translation. As mentioned, some of the challenges for automated QA checks are they can have a lot of false positive, which does create the need for a human to review these. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean there's a need for a super qualified PhD linguistic reviewer to review the false positives. I've reviewed many false positive reports myself from automated QA checks for languages that I don't speak, because a lot of times these are things that a qualified, somewhat qualified project manager can simply go through a list and say yes, no, false positive. And in my experience, 90 to 99% of things reported in automated reports are going to be false positives. There's just that many of them, and it's going to change depending upon each language as well. It's also, when we're talking about automated QA checks, we're really talking, and this brings up the difference between LQA and LQE and the different types of quality review and reporting. LQA would be language quality assurance. LQE would be language quality evaluation, although some people use these terms interchangeably. Some people use LQA to mean language quality assessment rather than language quality assurance. So make sure we're defining our terms before you're having that conversation with your vendor, with your client. But the automated checks aren't going to give you a score. If part of your goals for running a quality program or developing a quality framework is to be able to evaluate the quality and provide feedback on the quality of each language, of each handoff, of each project, then, well, you're going to need to have that human in the loop. You're definitely going to need to have a human reviewer, because the quality checks are just going to spit out a list of errors, but they're not going to be able to say this is a 90% quality, this is an 80% quality, like a formula-driven LQA form filled out by a human reviewer would be able to. Also with the automated checks, it is just an additional step. So it's going to add to the timeline. When timelines are super tight, it can be a pain in the butt. A lot of times these checks are not even run by the linguist themselves. They're sent back to a project manager or a localization engineer who will then run the checks, create a report, create a log file, and then they need to send that back to the translator, either to mark as false positive or to implement into the translation, which adds to the timeline. Does it add to the timeline a lot? Well, I mean, we're dealing with time zones here. So it could add, a very simple check could add 24 hours to the timeline just because the time zones are off. Maybe the LPM, the project manager, is sitting in a completely different time zone from the translator, and it just makes it more complex. A couple comments is that when it comes to human-based quality assurance, having an engaged reviewer base is a long-term and very beneficial quality program investment. We've talked about this a lot. People matter. The type of people that you have on your team, they matter. And once you get good people who really know the brand, know the style, know the expectations, then you're going to want to invest in them, and you're going to want to always make sure that you're building trust with them, maintaining trust with them, and continuing to invest in them. When it comes to automated QA workflows, these are going to work better particularly when you have a less complex, let's say, set of reference materials. So if you have a glossary with 1,000 terms in it and a 50-page style guide, your automated QA checks, there's going to be limits to what they can do. They're not going to be able to cover all of those bases all of the time. It's also going to require additional setup work, as I briefly mentioned earlier. Not to say that humans don't require setup work. You need to onboard and train humans as well. But these quality assurance tools, most of them, or at least the good ones, and by good ones, I mean the good features of the QA tools, they're going to require some setup. They're going to require maybe some engineering work or some glossary work, some linguistic work up front before you can really get the value out of them. Now, I'm talking a lot about all of these different tools that are available. I've mentioned built-in quality checks and translation management systems and CAT tools. I've mentioned plugins developed for specific CAT tools that are available. And I've mentioned third-party, standalone quality assurance checks. And so I just want to give you a couple resources here in case you want to dive deeper and start exploring what's available out there. And the first one is the Nimdzi TMS Feature Explorer. And we've had this for years and years and years. It was one of the first things that we published here at Nimdzi Insights. And it's a really great tool. It covers, I'm not going to say all because there's new ones being launched every day, but most, let's say, translation management systems available on the market today are included in the Feature Explorer tool. And, well, shoot, I should just bring it up for you rather than making you look at a slide. It's a really cool tool. If you head on over to nimdzi.com, open up a new tab if you want, and go to this interactive data here. There's a bunch of cool tools here in the interactive data. But this Feature Explorer tool right here goes through, you see a bunch of different tools, a bunch of different TMS systems in here, and you can actually filter them by the different things that you need, whether that's deployment models, supported file formats, functionalities, project management functionalities, available integrations that they have. But today we're talking about quality, so we can go through here and we can say, all right, I only want to look at tools with automated QA. I want to look at tools, two more, that have integration with third-party QA. And bam, all right, I'm filtering down now. So rather than having however many were up there before, dozens of different tools to look at. I'm looking at SmartCat, MemSource, MemoQ across XTM International. Very powerful tool, this TMS Feature Explorer. That's nimdzi.com/TMS. Go check it out. I think that's publicly available. Forgive me if it's not. I don't think it's just for Nimdzi partners. I think that's publicly available. Anybody can use that. This one, however, this is another cool tool, the TMS Feature Comparison Tool. So, driven by the same database of data as the Feature Explorer tool, but this is particularly useful for folks out there. Let's say you're client-side globalization manager and you're thinking, I really want to level up my technology game. Maybe I want to purchase our first translation management system, or maybe I want to just explore what's out there. I'm not really happy with what I'm working with right now, so I want to see what's out there. This tool, this is not the right thing. So interactive data, I can actually just go right here on this link, but if you're coming from the home page, you can just go interactive data, TMS Feature Comparison Tool. And this is going to have a lot of the same filters, but where this is really powerful here is I can pick up to 4 different tools, and I've already plugged XTM, so I'm gonna pick some new ones here. Let's go EasyLing, let's go Lingotech, let's go OnTram, let's go SmartLing. Bam. So I can pick up to 4 tools at a time, and I can hit compare. It's going to think probably for longer than it should because I'm running a lot of bandwidth to do this stream. But let's just there we go. All right. And it's going to give me a side-by-side comparison and tell me which tools have different features. So going by the same criteria that we looked at before, we got deployment models, supported file formats, and it just makes it really nice. Like before you don't have to issue an RFP to understand the different features available on the different TMS systems. If you are watching this and you work for a TMS provider and would like to be featured in this, please reach out to us, research@nimdzi.com. We'll make sure to take a look at your tool and get it uploaded into the database so that you can be featured in there as well. This isn't advertising for anybody. It's just research available out there on the market. Thank you, research team. Likewise, I've mentioned standalone QA tools out there, and we don't outside for standalone QA tools, we don't have a similar comparison tool yet. But what we do have is what do we call it? The Nimdzi Language Technology Atlas, which is a great piece of content, great piece of research that we publish every year. It's one of our flagship products, and if you scroll down just from the home page, you could probably find it under research too. You see some of our flagship pieces of research, and right here in yellow, we got the Language Technology Atlas. So if we click on this, it's going to take us over here, and it's kind of 2 different things. It's a map. You've seen these before. These are pretty popular to this format anyways. I don't think we invented this format, but it separates the different solutions, different technologies out there in the language services space into these categories. And we have, of course, translation management systems, translation business management systems, audiovisual translation tools, machine translation, integrators, marketplaces and platforms, interpreting systems, quality management, speech recognition are the categories. The categories next year might change as the industry evolves. You can also grab it, if you're a Nimdzi partner, you can grab it in spreadsheet format, which makes it just a lot easier, a lot more user-friendly to go through, and you can actually check out the links. They're linked to all of the different things to find out more information. So a different view to look at it there. But really, you owe it to yourself to just read through the report. It's not that long and kind of provides an update on what's cool and what's happening in the language services industry. And this one was for 2021. We're working on the one for 2022 right now, and that'll be published by the end of the year. Certainly, probably in Q3. And of course, you can always download it as a PDF too, and you get a nice PDF. But you have to give us your contact information. There's the catch. There's the catch. So I think that's it for additional resources. Oh, one more. Sorry, I feel like this is a sales pitch for the Nimdzi website, but this is a bunch of cool stuff that's over here. So we've looked at the feature explorer, we've looked at the feature comparison tool. One more thing, and this is for my integration API geeks out there, is the TMS integration map, which is essentially, it lets you look at the different integrations available for different TMS systems out there. If you're interested in building custom integrations for either an existing TMS that you're already using or a TMS that you might be using in the future. Now, if you're not a reader, well, if you are a reader, you can, like I said, download or check out the Language Technology Atlas. Either read it online or download the PDF. PDF's nicer to read, to be honest. Or you can go, my colleague Yulia Akulkova is the lead technology researcher here at Nimdzi Insights. There's plenty of content out there. I've interviewed here on Nimdzi Live before, and that's a nice hour conversation if you want to watch Yulia make me look like an idiot, essentially, talking about things that I don't understand. Or Yulia's put out this, I think it's a 4-part series, the Language Technology series, and that came out several months ago, or at the end of last year, maybe, and talking to different influencers and experts in the industry about the trends in language technology. And once again, all of that is available on either on our website, nimdzi.com, you can find it, or head on over to our YouTube channel where we archive all of that content. So, that's it. I feel like this has turned into a technology lesson rather than talking about quality, but the name of that section was Language Quality Assurance Tools. So there's some tools for you to look at. Just to wrap up here, for your consideration, quality tools available on the market help to reduce the amount of human work done. They're essentially meant to be used in conjunction with human processes, human-driven QA processes, and we call that the hybrid approach. And by running a hybrid approach, you can making sure that you're getting as much efficiency as possible while also not losing that human touch that's so important when it comes to subjective matters like evaluating quality. And lastly, of course, there's lots of tools on the market, as we've just seen. And if you're willing, or if you're interested in exploring your options out there, and a great place to start is nimdzi.com and get a list of what you'd like to check out. And if you're a Nimdzi partner, you can schedule office hours directly with Yulia Kokova, or write us an email at partnersupport@nimdzi.com for Nimdzi partners if you'd like to understand more. If you're not a Nimdzi partner, info@nimdzi.com, and then we'll make you a partner. Lesson 4, machine translation and quality. Once again, getting into the realm of topics I can only pretend to understand. We're going to be talking about machine translation. So in this section, we're going to take a look at really what is the current state of machine translation right now. Take a look at what are some of the prerequisites to rolling out machine translation, and particularly in regards to not sacrificing quality. Let's talk about machine translation post-editing, because we haven't really touched upon that. We've mentioned it in part 1, but we really haven't talked about what that is or what are the best practices surrounding machine translation post-editing. Sorry, pronunciation. So some quick notes on machine translation here. Essentially, I I was just talking about machine translation this morning on a Q&A session with a client, and there's a lot that is still kind of being defined when it comes to the realm of machine translation, particularly when it comes to the realm of machine translation quality expectations. So it used to be, I remember a time, and for a lot of you guys out there, maybe that time is still now, when you didn't want machine translation touching any of your high priority content. Like, keep that machine translation away from my marketing content because that needs to be great, it needs to be perfect. But this concept of MTPE, or machine translation post editing, is really come into its own and is quite a viable service out there. And what machine translation post editing is, essentially, it's the hybrid approach. We were just talking about hybrid approaches, where you're running text through, you're giving it to the machines, running it through machine translation, but rather than just delivering output translated by a bunch of robots, you're having it reviewed by a human. And much like a human would review matches from a translation memory, like say fuzzy matches, low fuzzy matches, they're reviewing the machine translation and they're editing it. They're post editing it. This is where we get the acronym MTPE, machine translation post editing. Now, there are some advantages to this. And first, and the most obvious one, is of course an end product that, in theory, and in practice, is indistinguishable from human translation. So you're getting the advantages of efficiency, which come, or cost reduction, or time reduction, whatever your priorities are. You're getting the advantages that come with machine translation, but the end product is the same. The end product is the same because it's going through a qualified post editor who's bringing that up to the quality level up to human parity. Now, I kind of, you hear the hesitation, and I caveat this a lot. I was saying in theory, because really when it comes to machine translation, the quality can vary considerably. And the quality of MT output is dependent upon a bunch of different factors. So machine translation for different content types is not going to be the same. Machine translation, and then we can get into a discussion between neural machine translation, traditional machine translation, all rules-based, statistical, all of these different things. They're going to have different output qualities. Based upon content type, based upon language pairs, and that's because all of these machines, just like you would have to train a human linguist, all of these machines need to be trained. Now, you don't sit a robot down in a classroom and teach them how to translate, but what you do is you feed them a bunch of bilingual content. So, i.e., previously translated content, think TTX files or TMX files, whatever format. And the machine's going to read that, and through the magic of science, learn how to better translate the content. So, as you can imagine, mature languages, last time we talked about mature languages versus immature languages. Mature languages that have had a ton of content translated into them have out there in the world a much bigger corpus of data available to train them. Think there's more bilingual data for English to French than there is for Swahili to Slovakian. So you can guess that the MT engines that handle English to French translation are probably better trained and the output's better than the machine translation engines that handle Swahili to Slovakian, if they even exist. In fact, probably what they would do in such a situation is just do, a lot of times for less mature languages, they'll translate into English, and then the machine will translate into the other language, which brings its own concerns, as you can imagine. But one of the advantages of post-editing is that, first of all, you can measure what we call edit distance. So this provides an ongoing, real-time evaluation of the quality of the machine translation. And edit distance is simply the distance between the delta between what did the machine translate it as and what was the final translation according to the human post editor. And if the human post editor didn't change anything, that edit distance is 0. It's a very good output. If the human translator had to basically rewrite the whole string, well, that's not a good edit distance. The output quality is not as great as you'd like on that. But also, this creates this feedback loop. When you're having these post editors review the content and make those changes, then it's many times in real time training the machine translation engines as you go along. So for every string that you post edit and submit with a human, the machine is learning and the machine is getting better. So constant improvement on that. Now, do linguists all love working in machine translation? No, not necessarily, because of this wild card. It makes it very challenging for them to do their jobs, and it makes it more challenging for them to accurately estimate the amount of effort. So without machine translation, if you send me 1,000 words and say I need this translated into German, okay, I can do that. Like, I know how much effort that's going to take. But if you say, oh, and we're going to run it through our machine translation engines, well, I don't know how good your engines are. So it makes it really hard for me to understand the effort involved. And if I don't understand the effort, I don't understand how much money I need to charge. But what you're going to do is you're going to try to force this generic discount down my throat, which might be okay, it might not be. Like I said, we're still kind of working out the kinks when it comes to quality. We have oh man, Kirill's in the comments. I'm sure he's making fun of me. Kirill, or the human post editor was over. Oh, I like this. Kirill says, or the human post editor was overzealous and made a lot of preferential changes that could have been avoided because the raw quality was actually good enough. Yeah, that happens too. Right? There's still this, I shouldn't say still, there can be this conflict, I want to say, between human post editors and machine translation. And some of it's kind of red pen syndrome. If you give someone a red pen and say make some changes, then they're going to find changes to make. But some of it too can be that humans don't like machine translation. So it's like they actively try to make it seem lower quality than it actually is. All right. Some more notes on machine translation here. Once again, the reminder / caveat / excuse that this is not my area of expertise. But we already covered this. Adaptive MT, that's what we call it when it's automatically learning from and making improvements as you're going along and post editing it. I find to get around some of these, it's not that I find, it's kind of a best practice to get around some of these unknowns around MT output quality out there. It makes sense to run an initial pilot when you're really rolling out an MT program. And MT really makes sense for ongoing programs where there's a lot of content coming on an ongoing basis. Before you agree to what are the expectations, SLAs, rates around machine translation and machine translation post-editing, run a pilot. Actually run the content through MT, send it to the translators, ask for that translator's feedback, and make sure that everybody has a chance to buy into any expectations that are set when it comes to machine translation. There's a lot that I'm not going to get into today, but there's new advancements in artificial intelligence that are really kind of like self-learning and self-training, AI, self-generating bilingual training data. There's companies out there that are working quite a bit in that space. If you want to hear more about that, Yulia Kokova is the one to talk to. But I do have some slides I can send you to if you want to reach out to me directly. The last thing to note is that machine translation, it's not as monolithic of this thing that it used to be. It's becoming more and more mainstream, more and more common. I remember a time when machine translation was like extra credit, like it was impressive. You know, you'd tell someone, "Oh, we're running full machine translation on X, Y, and Z." And, "Oh, wow, you're doing that? How'd you do that? You know, tell me more." And nowadays, it's getting closer and closer to just standard translation management systems. And my prediction, it's not my prediction, I've stole this from somebody. I'm not sure who, I want to say Kirti Vashi said this first. But over time, we're going to see machine translation and translation management or translation memory technology just kind of come together until, at least in our perception, it's just kind of seen as one feature. It's translation management and machine translation working together. And because the purpose is the same, the purpose is to increase efficiency, reduce real or weighted word count. And we're already seeing that happen. As mentioned, there is some prep work to roll out a machine translation. The prep work's getting easier and easier out there, and but there's still some prep work to do. Like you can, okay, let me caveat this by saying you can just hook up to Google Translate or Microsoft, what's it called, Microsoft Translator, Microsoft solution. The big dogs all have their own machine translation solutions out there. Some of them are free, some of them are charged. Some of there's out of box solutions that you can hook up to and start taking advantage of MT. The problem is it's not going to be trained to your content. It might be trained with a bunch of other people's content, but you don't want to copy other people's style and branding and terminology, for example. So you really, if you want to roll out a serious MT program, you're going to want to train the data. So that means getting those bilingual files, the corpus of data. Train it. Make sure that you have your glossaries on lockdown before you use them to train the machine translation. They're in step 3. And then when it comes to managing the individual handoffs, you process the checks to be pre-translated through MT. Now, keep in mind, I would always prioritize the translation memories first. So first, what I would do is I'd apply the TMs, and then I'd run the new text through the machine translation. Because if you have 100% matches in your TMs, those are obviously going to take priority over machine translated content. I feel that if you have fuzzy matches in your TM, unless the MT engines are really good and you've got the pilot data to prove it, I would prioritize fuzzy matches in the TM over the MT content. And then, of course, you send it to a post editor. Now, post editors can, their primary focus is to bring the content up to human parity, but they also do serve the role of evaluating the machine translation quality. And a lot of this, as mentioned, is done via this metric called edit distance, where we're reviewing the delta between the final product and the output from the raw machine translation. But you can also incorporate into your workflow a process by which the post editors are providing feedback, both objective and subjective, on the quality of the machine translation. Make sure that that's improving over time, not getting worse over time. Like I said, lots of different factors out there affecting quality, and it really becomes it falls upon the post editors a lot of times to flag those, because if they don't, then everybody all the way up the value chain to the client is just going to assume that the machines are doing their jobs and everything's fine. So post editors, if you're out there, quality review, and the reason we're talking about this within the context of quality management is because this is all stuff that quality managers need to be aware of, and there's an aspect of basically doing LQA on machine translated content and making sure that feedback gets sent to the appropriate places. Now, If you want to hear what the actual experts know about machine translation, we have a report for that. We have an updated report for that. That was just published not that long ago. And it's called The Machines Are Among Us. It's over on Nimdzi.com. I believe it's for Nimdzi partners only. So go check that out. We're going to talk about how LSPs make money with MT. So just getting into the nitty gritty, the practical stuff. How much money is there in the machine translation world industry, I guess, different types of machine translation, which engines and which providers are providing the best quality, how much does it cost, how much should you charge, and some checklists, very practical things to do for LSPs that are interested in getting into that space. I feel that by now we already have a good idea of what machine translation post-editing is, because we've talked about that in previous slides. But just to recap here, my main takeaway is that post-editing is a skill. It's a new skill. It's not the same as translation. And so qualified reviewers means that they need to be trained in the post-editing process. And I'm going to show you an example of what that is in a couple slides here. Because you want to make sure that your post-editors aren't spending more time to post-edit the machine translation output than they would to simply translate it from scratch. And you hear that all the time from translators, especially if they're not experienced in MTPE processes. You hear from translators that say, oh, I can't use this. It's going to be quicker for me just to translate it from scratch. And I've had translators do that to me before, where I send them, I said, all right, this is machine translation, so I'm not paying you as much, essentially. I mean, I said it nicer than that. And they're like, okay, fine. And, you know, they send it back and it's fine and everything's good. And then I come to find out later that they were just ignoring the MT and they were just translating everything from scratch. And so I was paying them less, but they weren't doing less work, which is not an ideal situation. I'll just make a note. I'm not going to get into the nuances of neural machine translation, but that's the new kid on the block. It's pretty good. It's pretty great when it comes to sounding like a human. Is the strength. That's how I can summarize it the best. And if you want to sound like a human, use neural machine translation. If you want to be accurate, neural machine translation might not be the best approach. Now, there are hybrid. Go read the language technology report. There are solutions out there to help bridge that gap between more traditional methods of machine translation and neural machine translation, kind of get the best of both worlds. But just something to be aware of. If you're responsible for quality, quality doesn't just mean sounds like a human, sounds natural. Quality also means, of course, that it's an accurate translation. So I feel this is such an important point to drive home that there is a whole slide dedicated to this. Machine translation post-editing, MTPE, is related to, but it is a completely different, it's not completely, it's related to, but it is a different skill set from translation. It is a different skill set from review, a different skill set from editing human content, right? There are certain processes, that best practices that should be followed. And I want to drive this home because I think a lot of times project managers who are perhaps new to machine translation post-editing workflows make the mistake of, you know, running the content through MT and then sending it to the same translators that they would use for any other job without providing them the training on how to address MTPE. And you can do that, but you're going to run into different situations like what I just described, with translators really not knowing how to do it, maybe just translating from scratch, and generally nobody's really happy because of that. So I talk about these best practices. Now, up on screen here, you see some best practice. I'll make it bigger for you. You see some bullet points here, and I'm really not going to read every single bullet point verbatim. I will give you the gist, though. I want to say before that, though, that it is up to you and your program, and as part of your language quality framework, to define a machine translation post-editing process or set of best practices that works within the context of your program. So I think that's kind of a takeaway from this whole workshop, parts 1 and 2, which is defining a quality framework is something that you're going to do for each program that you work on, each client that you work with. It could be different for different content types even, right? If you're on the client side. But there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So I don't mean to imply that this is the golden rule, but this is a good place to start. And, you know, even if you did just copy this, it would be better than nothing, right? So in general, there's this 5 to 10 second rule, right? And essentially, it's a process for making sure that you're not spending too much time on a string. Well, we spend too much time post-editing machine translation content when the content is bad, right? How do we know if the content's going to be bad before we sit down to translate it? Well, we need to have a process to understand quickly, is this string, this next string in my queue here, is it going to be worth my time to post-edit it, or should I scrap it and just start from scratch? Because if I spend the whole time reading the whole thing just to understand if it's bad, well, I've already wasted time. Seconds matter. When you're dealing with hundreds or thousands of different strings to translate, seconds matter in the long term, right? So 5 to 10 second evaluation. Don't spend more than 5 to 10 seconds on it. Really, 5 seconds to understand, is this a good quality or a bad quality translation? You know, read the first part of the string for 5 seconds. If it's bad, throw it out, translate from scratch, right? If it's good, edit it. If a string is super long, then you can go with this high 5 and low 5, or high 5 and low 5 rule. So essentially, read the first 5 words. If it's good, then keep reading, right? Read up until it's bad, essentially. And then when it gets bad, then you correct that part. Now, if the first 5 words are bad, then you're going to want to go to the last part and see if the ending of the string is bad, right? If they're both bad, throw it out, start over, right? If the end can be salvaged, salvage the end, start from the beginning, and edit that part. And essentially, and you can read the rest for yourself, take a screenshot if you like. But essentially, the goal is efficiency. The goal is, am I making the most use of my time? Because time is money. I'm not getting paid by the hour. I'm getting paid by the word. So I need to get through this. I need to get through it quickly if I'm a post editor for machine translation. So to recap, machine translation, the machines are getting smarter. It keeps improving, but it's still something that it's a space that we need to watch from a quality management perspective, because the implications on quality and quality expectations are going to continue to evolve as the technology continues to evolve. I'll say it one more time. Post-editing is a separate skill set than translation. Don't assume your favorite translator is going to be a great post-editor, or that they're even going to want to do it, essentially. You got to make sure that all of your linguists that are handling MTPE are properly trained in that space. All right. Moving into lesson 5. This is our last official lesson for the day. Here we talk about quality customization and cultivation. So we're kind of starting to bring it all home here with the lessons we've learned through lessons 1 through 4, part 1, part 2 of this workshop. And the end result here is quality, right? That's what we're talking about here today. So how do we cultivate processes that lead to quality? How do we cultivate a culture of quality, right? And it comes through this linguistic quality framework that we're going to talk about, that we've been talking about, essentially. So how do we create it, and how do we customize it so that it's fitting the specific needs of our program? There's no one size fits all. And a big part of that is how are we making sure that the end users are happy? And that's a whole different can of worms that we could do a whole separate workshop on. But today, within the context of a traditional quality framework, we're going to talk about how do we make sure that we're getting feedback from the end users and incorporating that and evolving the quality framework accordingly. So, what is linguistic quality cultivation? Well, a lot of it is relationship driven. Uh-oh, typo. A lot of it's relationship driven. Quality reviewers are humans, and humans work with humans, and that means there's a relational component to it. So the stronger the relationship, I should say perhaps the stronger the trust is between your translators, your reviewers, your language champions, what we have here, brand strategists, local market stakeholders. If you're on the client side, what do your in-country people say? Do they have a relationship? Do they have trust with the folks in your supply chain that are responsible for quality? Because if they do, it's going to go a lot smoother. You don't want this adversarial relationship. And that can happen very quickly if not managed properly. Is an adversarial situation can pop up where you've got the local in-market, if not end users, then brand champions or marketing team just at war with the linguists or the reviewers or the whoever it may be on the vendor side who are responsible for evaluating quality. And a lot of it's just not communicating properly, not setting proper expectations. So a lot of good can come from putting the person responsible for quality. Remember last week we talked about market champions or language champions or language leads, someone who's the voice of God. We also talked about the voice of God for a particular language within the localization vendor. A lot of good can come from putting them in direct content with the linguistic stakeholders on the client side. I'm not saying they need to meet every week. They could. But building that relationship allows for a certain amount of expectations to be set from the very beginning. So those client-side brand champions can tell directly to the vendor-side brand champions, these are my expectations, this is how I'd like to see things translated, these are my pain points, and it's just going to go much smoother. Otherwise, you're playing this game of telephone where that communication is probably being logged in a spreadsheet, going through multiple project managers, being filtered, and then maybe being sent back to the vendor-side reviewers. So just put them in contact with each other. Now, there are risks associated with that. And the one at the top of my mind is egos, essentially. And this usually happens when you wait for there to be a problem or a big battle or a disagreement before you put those people in contact. Because now they're coming into this, I think it should be translated this way. I think it should be translated this way, blah, blah, blah. And so that needs to be managed. Oh, also, the reason that might make sense to put them in contact is they can communicate in their own language, right? If there's a disagreement between the client-side stakeholder in Japan sitting in Tokyo and the vendor-side language champion, why would you make them discuss that in English in a spreadsheet or logging bugs? It could be so much more beneficial just to let them get on the phone, get on a Zoom meeting, and talk to each other in their native language about their native language. Right. So a lot of this is relationship driven. A lot about assets driven. We talked about creating glossaries and style guides and linguistic assets. Yes, that's certainly part of an onboarding phase of a language quality assurance program, but it never stops. Remember, it's a cycle. You're constantly getting feedback. You're getting feedback from the end users. You're getting feedback from the language teams, and you're making sure to update into those reference materials. Keeping in mind not to let it get out of hand, right? You don't want 90-page style guides because then nobody's going to read it. but there should be a process for what gets to get updated into a style guide and what doesn't. And this can be done through just regular structured feedback. If you think about it, LQA forms in and of themselves are a form of regular structured feedback. But you can be meeting with your language and with your linguistic stakeholders on a regular basis, bi-weekly, monthly, or at least quarterly. They should be part of the quarterly business review process if you're running those, or if your account management team is running quarterly business reviews. So we've been talking a lot about quality framework. Now we're talking about customizing. And I've used this word evolving your quality framework over time. We've talked about a hybrid approach at the beginning of today. Last time we were talking about standardized frameworks like the TAUS DQF framework. And once again, the theme I want you to take away is that the point of setting up a language quality program is to make it work for your program, right? So tweak it, adapt it, do what you need to. But in our opinion, here at Nimdzi Insights, there are some things that a quality framework, most quality frameworks should have in common. They should be informed, flexible, thorough, visual, transparent, innovative, and cross-functional. So informed, this is essentially making sure that it's this concept of right sourcing that we've talked about. Make sure that you're picking the right reviewers. Make sure that you're picking the right translators, for that matter. Flexible means we talked about dynamic quality framework, right? The scope of the QA can vary throughout the project. The type of the QA can vary throughout the project. With that real-time reporting, you're reporting on quality. Why would you continue investing a lot of resources into running LQAs for a language that's consistently passing LQA? Maybe you can dial down the LQA on that and run more quality assurance checks on struggling languages. This is why it's important to make sure that you're having a transparent and visual quality framework to get to these other points down here. So transparent just means everybody has access to the data. Everybody has access to the language quality data. Visual means that they can understand it, that it's presented in a format that's actually meaningful for people. And that's going to allow you to, either you as the quality manager or the program manager or whoever, to make command decisions onto where to invest more or where to invest less into monitoring quality. Innovative and cross-functional, I want to drive home the point here that more and more automation is going to enter the quality assurance space. Particularly, the watchword is AI. I know it's a buzzword, but artificial intelligence is doing cool things when it comes to increasing the efficiency of quality processes and automating more and more as it itself matures as a technology. It's kind of a visual representation here is that, driven by these concepts or themes of collaboration, feedback, and reliability, the goal, what we want to cultivate here, and the stakeholders involved in the different themes, aspects of it, we need a consistent brand voice across, if not across all languages. I'm not saying your brand voice in English needs to be the same as your brand voice in German. But it could be, but that's for you to decide. But your brand voice in German needs to be consistent across German products, across German marketing material, across, your brand needs to maintain consistency in each language as a bare minimum, right? Make sure that you're involving your brand stakeholders, whoever they may be. That's usually on the client side. That could include up to and including the end users, the customers of the product. Quality is about humans. Humans are about relationships. So be fostering those relationships, whether it's relationships between the quality management and the ops team, whether it's relationships between the translators and the reviewers, or the reviewers and the brand champions on the client side, or the reviewers and the end users. Use your judgment, but building relationships means building trust. Building trust means having one less thing to worry about, because the egos kind of go away once there's an environment of trust, and of course, including your translation team at all steps in the process. Now, when we talk about incorporating your end users or your customers into the quality process, this can look many different ways. And it's something that we help clients with here at Nimdzi, actually. It's because there's a strong research component to it, reaching out and understanding customer sentiment, gathering customer feedback, running focus groups, user brand perception studies, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't need to be that complex, right? Because usually when a user, an end user of a product, a customer of a product in a foreign market or in any market is not satisfied with that product, they're going to complain. And they might complain publicly on Twitter and tag your brand, or they might write an email, or they might walk into their local store and talk to somebody. The goal here is, are there channels set up to make sure that you're capturing that user feedback? And this can be tricky because a lot of times this is outside of the control of a language quality manager or even overarching globalization program director. So you need to be making sure that you're working with your stakeholders, your counterparts in the customer success team or the account management team, whoever it may be, and setting up channels so that that end user feedback can make it to your desk. And then you can take action on it, right? So some general principles here is any process that you set up here needs to be rigorous, which means it's systematic. There's a process to it. It's accurate. It needs to be thorough. So by thorough, I mean it needs to be taken seriously. There needs to be a categorization of the issues, just like there would be for a standard LQA form that you're filling out. Your end users aren't going to fill out LQA forms. Do not ask them to. That would be unreasonable. But you need to get it into a consistent format so that you can process it accordingly, which leads us kind of to the structured aspect of it. What are those workflows? What are the communication channels to make sure that everyone knows what their responsibility is to the customer and to making sure that their feedback is taken seriously? And keep in mind, this isn't to say that all customer feedback is good customer feedback. Sometimes people complain just because they want to complain. So you have to take it seriously. You don't have to listen to it all of the time. There's been plenty of customer feedback that I've received at previous programs that I worked on that we evaluated and said, actually, I hear this, but it goes against our brand guidelines, and we want to be intentional about our brand guidelines. Just for example, whatever structured system you're using, make sure that it's tracked so that there's an audit trail. You can go back and figure out what was changed when. It's an ongoing process. It's this evolution is my word of the day. So it's iterative. Make sure that it's you're able to change it and adapt the workflow to meet the changing needs of the program. And of course, as with everything in language quality is all about transparency. Make sure that everything is not just tracked, but that it's visible and relevant stakeholders have access to that information, because they're the ones that are going to need to use that information in order to make actual, real business decisions. So, kind of visualize what does that look like. Quick example here. Step one, end user is going to submit feedback. You can create a ticket, maybe have a ticketing system, maybe you're using Jira, who knows. The ticket's going to be tracked. It's going to submit it into some sort of database, some sort of repository where you're tracking all of this information. Then it's probably going to be reviewed by one of the language managers or the language manager. And this is, it's kind of what we call triage. So this one gets addressed, this one doesn't get addressed for whatever reason. So having that single point triage, all of that stuff helps keep consistency in what we're working on, what we're not working on, what we're prioritizing, what we're not prioritizing. The approved tickets, the ones that we are prioritizing, get sent for implementations, and they're implemented into the end product, but also implemented into the relevant assets. So if it's affecting anything that's changed in the end product, you need to go back and find that string in the translation memory and update that string in the translation memory. Otherwise, the next time you get that string as 100% match, it's going to be right back in there. Or depending upon how you manage your TMs, it's just going to revert that string anyways. If you're using like ice matches or something, it's gonna change it. So very, 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 very important that not only are you updating it in the end product, but you're also updating it in the assets. That includes glossaries and style guides as well. Do not translate, all of that stuff in the linguistic assets. Make sure that it's updated, and make sure that the translators and linguists know that it was updated. Don't just sneak it into the style guide and expect everybody to download that into their brains like the Matrix. There's you need to have a process for letting translators and linguistic team members know when something has been changed. So to wrap up this section, quality is a human-driven process. It relies upon relationships, so invest accordingly. There are a lot of automated QA checks out there, but 9 times out of 10, you'd have to make a good case to convince me otherwise. The hybrid approach is going to be the way to go, leveraging the efficiencies of automation and the expertise of humans. A customized quality framework should be informed, flexible, thorough, innovative, visual, transparent, and cross-functional, as we discussed in more detail. And end-user feedback needs to be incorporated into the quality framework so that real-life user preferences can be captured in the linguistic assets. And with that, I think we're ready to start wrapping this up, folks. I think a great way to do that is just with the do's and don'ts of language quality assurance. And this is perhaps going back over the last 2 workshops, so not just what we covered today, which is why I think it makes a great wrap-up section. So do source linguists per content type. Pick linguists that are specialized in content types. Don't source the same linguist regardless of content creation. Do try to have a clear idea of what is important. So define quality. We talked about what is quality. That's a conversation that needs to be had. Do not forget to set up a quality definition and metrics early on. And do not forget to communicate quality expectations ahead of time. Do determine which are the areas where the most excellent output is needed. So for example, marketing is that's the one that people usually like to talk about, right? Marketing. Because it has a high quality expectation, right? Do not fail to allow enough leeway in the schedule for quality checks. Do encourage feedback from all stakeholders, but make it standardized, make it systematic, right? Make it trackable, make it visible, make it actionable, make it transparent, make it all of those things as much as possible. Do not solely rely on automated checks for quality management purposes. Don't. Have some sort of quality management with a human in there. Do evangelize translation quality since the start. So quality from the very beginning, right? When you're setting up a new localization program, part of that program is defining quality, defining a quality framework. Do it from the very beginning. Do not implement stakeholder feedback without prior analysis. That's that triage that we're talking about. Just because someone complains, and that person could be an end customer, it could be an important end customer. That person could be the CEO of the client. Don't just blindly implement something because someone complained about it. Check it first, triage it. Do enroll the help of a quality expert to design the quality framework. Yeah. Don't watch this workshop and think, okay, I got this. I'm going to go set up a quality framework. Budget allowing, of course, I would get someone on board who is familiar with setting up a quality framework. If not, I mean, actually, I should say there's other options out there, right? Like if you're on the client side, a lot of this can be, you can rely upon your trusted vendors to help advise on this if you trust them in this area. Nimdzi does actually a lot of work. A lot of this workshop was adapted from a client engagement that we had, helping a client set up a large quality program, right? So there's consultants out there. You can ask your LSPs, you can ask your supply chain, but get someone who's done it before, essentially. Do not forget to track feedback and legacy issues. Do be open to revisiting quality definition over time, evolving, right? Based upon results, based upon user feedback. Be flexible. Be flexible. Do not get stuck with an unchangeable definition of quality. To my previous point, do not consider quality in isolation and outside other localization production processes and workflow, right? Quality, all right, here's my challenge to ops guys, project managers like myself. Like, we're always complaining that, localization is seen as an afterthought. We're just, we're the last box on a long checklist. No one gives us no one prioritizes localization, right? It's all about the dev teams. It's all about the product teams. So, I mean, that's kind of our refrain that we sing in the localization industry, and don't pretend like it's not. I hear that every time I go to a conference. That's what people are complaining about. So why would you treat your quality team that way? Because that's what happens. Don't treat your quality framework, your quality program, the way immature companies treat their localization program. Quality is a very important part of localization. Do have a hybrid approach to quality, manual plus automated, and do not make a one-size-fits-all approach, because it's not. Language is dynamic. Languages are different. Cultures are different. Content types are different. There is no one-size-fits-all. So, to start recapping our lessons over the last two sessions here, and yeah, we're not going to get into the bonus content. I do have some bonus content here. Maybe we'll do another day. We have defining project management in regards to quality management. This is something I'll be delivering for a client, I think, next week. Managing the quality process. And this is a lot about kind of like the ins and outs of project management components of quality. But we're not going to get to that today. We will wrap this up. So, recapping our lesson here. What have we learned over the last 2 weeks together? Quality is key to a localization program success. Gosh, I hope you took that away from this workshop. If not, I'm not doing my job. We should start planning for quality since the very beginning. What is quality for us? What is quality for the company? How does that correlate to brand values? These are all conversations that we need to have because they're an important part of defining a quality program. If we can't define what is quality, then we can't measure and report on what quality is. Process and communication are key. Quality is human-driven process. Humans are about relationships. Invest accordingly. The quality process interrelates to the entire localization product workflow and should not be dealt with in isolation. Do not treat it as a checkbox. Don't treat your quality folks the way your development team treats the localization team. A hybrid quality approach is automated and human review. Adjusting quality KPIs to expectation, content types, and language tiers is an incomplete sentence. But essentially, it's this concept that we have of not all languages are created equal, not all content types are created equal. We looked at mature languages, immature languages. Adjust your KPIs accordingly, right? Your Navajo marketing content or Navajo help content is not going to need to adhere to the same key performance indicators as your Japanese UI content. Adjust your KPIs accordingly. So that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, getting you out of here half an hour early. Is anyone still here? Looks like it. 19 of y'all. Thank you for joining today. I don't have any more Workshop Wednesdays planned. I think I'm out next week, but when I come back, I'm gonna get something on the schedule. If there is a workshop that you'd like to see on a topic that's important to you, I'm going to ask you reach out to us. You can send an email to send an email to live@nimdzi.com and let us know if there's a workshop that you'd like to see. Here's a few of the workshops that we have available, and a lot of them I'm able to give. Some of them I might need to bring in someone who actually knows what they're talking about here. So if you see something up here on the screen that could be useful for you, could be useful for your team, could be useful for a client that you're chasing and that you want to try to invite to a workshop, then let us know. live@nimdzi.com. So with that, I'd like to thank all 18 now of you brave souls for sticking with us today. Go check out part 1 if you haven't already done that. Any information that you need from us, info@nimdzi.com. And make sure to check out our events page and follow us on LinkedIn to see the upcoming Nimdzi Live podcast live streams, as well as the new LinkedIn or Workshop Wednesdays that we're going to be scheduling. Once again, my name is Tucker Johnson, and it has been a lot of fun talking about quality with you guys today. I hope you got some value out of it, and we'll see you next time.